Hey, I'm Myriam. This is Genesis, and today I wanted to tell you, as a massive language lover and as a historian, how you could combine some knowledge from historical periods and their methods for language learning and integrate them into your language learning journey or any other studying journey. But I think it really works for languages because I'm gonna focus on American founding fathers and how they learned French. So, yeah, stay tuned and let's get started. Thank you, Genesis. Let's start with Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson actually started learning French at school, which, is an advantage of some sort. He had proper tutoring, proper grammar, construction, and it was early enough that he could remember it and assimilate it easily, I suppose. But that's not the part that's really interesting because, of course, learning French early is an advantage. He learned French, Latin, Greek, Italian, and English, of course, as he said. What is really interesting about Thomas Jefferson is that he kept learning French later on in life, as he was very interested in French culture. But also, he was interested in books in general, and most of the really good books could be found in French. As he said to his nephew, you have to learn French because basically everything that you need is in French. Science, diplomacy, linguistics, law, which was very interesting at the time. Law, he said, except for medicine, everything is in French, so you will need to learn French, which, of course, sounds exactly like English is today. Thomas Jefferson also was an ambassador to France in 1784. And he said, as Thomas Jefferson came to France, he realized that he was not as fluent as he wanted to be. He felt that he could not really express his thoughts, as he said to William Temple Franklin, who happens to be, Benjamin Franklin's grandson. I understand the French so imperfectly as to be uncertain whether those to whom I speak and myself mean the same thing. Reportedly, his daughter said the same thing about his level of French when coming to France. So he was not a beginner, but he was put in a position of difficulty by being in France. And I think he mastered it by reading a lot. He was a collectioner of books, and that actually paid off. So if I had to have anything to take away from it, it would be not start early necessarily, because we all know that starting in high school, middle school, we don't necessarily have a lot of memories in languages we learned. There are so many people, myself included, that learned a language in middle school and that have no recollection. And it's really the fact that Thomas Jefferson kept going, kept learning French, that makes him a good example for any language learning, and I think that's what I appreciate the most about him. And then Mr. Electricity himself, Benjamin Franklin. Benjamin Franklin is actually a very big symbol of the American Revolution, of the culture, of the Enlightenment also. That is the reason why he was chosen to be a representative for the United States when the United States didn't exist, to come to France and be an envoy at the court of France and ask for money, gunpowder, an envoy to support the American Revolution. It was seen as this typical quintessential American in terms of intelligence, freedom, but also because he was playing the Puritan role that he was assigned, and he actually liked playing Puritan. So today Puritan is not necessarily a very positive word, but at the time it was also the model of frugality and modesty, and also a very rich inner life, if that makes sense. It's like having a very busy intellectual life, being very preoccupied by what's going on in the mind, and not necessarily have time for fashion. And Benjamin Franklin knew that he was perceived as the American, that he was representing the American genius, American scientist. So he played it up and decided to dress as a Puritan in Paris. He really enjoyed France because one thing that is really great about Benjamin Franklin is that he liked having fun. So of course it meant courting women, having mistresses, and having little games, and being really comfortable with himself, being comfortable speaking without knowing any grammar, speaking with a terrible accent. That's what people said about him. That's reportedly, that's what John Adams actually wrote about Benjamin Franklin. More on that later. But yeah, Benjamin Franklin really had fun with it. He was someone who wanted to express his personality. He was someone who wanted to express his love for life and women and France. And he didn't let his lack of grammar and construction get in the way of a good time. So what is also really important for Benjamin Franklin and his learning French is that he actually decided that he wanted to learn French to read books, and that it was enough for him. That is a very, very precious thing, because he decided he had a very clear, quantifiable, measurable goal. He wanted to read books in French. And I think that is very, very important, because learning a language is, of course, learning how to speak, learning how to listen, learning how to read and write and pronounce correctly. But he decided that pronunciation, grammar. So he decided that he was a very successful speaker as soon as he could read a book. And again, I think a lot of people would benefit from having a clear, measurable goal. Take a book in your target language and see that you can only read 5%. Great, now you know. And in a couple of months, you come back, maybe it's 10%, maybe it's 11%, and one day it's going to be 80%. So he wrote, I had begun in 1733 to study languages. I soon made myself so much a master of the French as to be able to read the books with ease. I then undertook the Italian. An acquaintance, who was also learning it, used often to tempt me to play chess with him. Finding this took up too much of the time I had to spare for study, I, at length, refused to play any more, unless, on this condition, that the victor in every game should have the right to impose a task, either in part of the grammar to be got by heart, or in translation. And finally, John Adams. John Adams is a very interesting case because he started learning when he was older. He learned a bit at Harvard College when he was maybe 15, I would say. But he said he didn't learn anything, it was just grammar and construction. And when he was nominated to live in France and represent America to be, the United States to be, he panicked. He said he was too old. And finally, he found out that it was quite possible to learn a language as an adult. So he's the best example, I think. What John Adams did is first, he moved into Passy, which nowadays is within Paris, but at the time was just on the outskirts of Paris, a village. And he lived in the same house as Benjamin Franklin. And what he has to write about Benjamin Franklin is just too good, because he was really, really jealous, so jealous, because Benjamin Franklin was very, very famous, and he was credited for everything that has to do with the revolution, the American Revolution, of course. And yeah, he was jealous. And even though people said behind Benjamin Franklin's back that the accent was not so good and you could not understand him, John Adams still felt jealous because he thought that's unfair. He didn't do anything. He was not that good at politics. He basically only did some science. So yeah, that's really, really funny how bitter it was. I'll come back to that just after. But John Adams, he learned French by focusing on reading, of course, that is very typical for an 18th century educated man. That is not exceptional. But he decided to read things that I think were really complicated. He read magazines that were intended for French speakers, and he even used books when he went to the theatre. So there was this method where you took the book of the play, and then you went to the theatre, Comédie Française. He thought it was the best, and you read what the actors were saying, line by line, on the book. And I think it's really fantastic because that's a method I was given nowadays, like take an audiobook and take the book and read at the same time to take the prosody in and have the music of the language. And I thought, that's such a good idea that they already had it, of course, but you had to go to the theatre. He thought it was really, really fun, and he wished when he left France that he had done it more, and that he had been more forward and a bit more daring, like going to the shop and talking to the tavern keepers and the shopkeepers and maybe the saleswomen. He thought, well, I should have talked more, I should have dared more. If I had to do it all over again, that is something I would focus my energy on. He focused a lot of his energy on conjugation, spent a lot of time on grammar, structure. That's why he was so mad when Benjamin Franklin told him he knew nothing of grammar. For him, that was such a big deal. So John Adams was very studious, very typical good student kind of person. And after 1 year, he was really good at speaking French. He was really better at making sentences. When you read what he wrote in French, it's actually excellent. He had a really good sense of the grammar. He did say that he wished he had stayed 1 more year maybe to practice his spoken French. So John Adams on Benjamin Franklin. It is universally believed in France, England, and all Europe that his electric wand has accomplished all this revolution, but nothing is more groundless. He has done very little. He did not even make the Constitution of Pennsylvania, bad as it is. I think it's really fantastically bitter. So, one last very bitter John Adams quote. The history of our revolution will be one continued lie from one end to the other. The essence of the whole will be that Dr. Franklin's electrical rod smote the earth, and out sprung General Washington. That Franklin electrified him with his rod, and thence forward these two conducted all the policy negotiations, legislations, and war. It's fantastic. That is so gothic. You have this very Frankenstein-y vibe. I absolutely love it. I really love reading John Adams because he's so profoundly human and sincere in his description of his feelings that sometimes you have this very profoundly human moment where he's very jealous. So, to wrap it up, Jefferson's methods was starting early, going to school, having a formal education, and also reading a lot of books and not giving up. Benjamin Franklin, so his method consisted in having a clear goal, knowing what I wanted out of it, which was reading books and also having fun, having challenges and having a good time with people that spoke French. John Adams' methods, listening to people that could speak French, even if he didn't have to interact with them. He really, really was a big fan of the Comédie Française. He thought it was a great way of learning how to pronounce French. And also he collected books and magazines, and he was a big reader. Hey, and for the conclusion of this video, I wanted to introduce you to Naomi, who is, of course, a calico as well of Genesis. She's her niece, actually. Anyway, what I wanted to say that is that, of course, you can integrate those methods and those resources that were used in a time before electricity, even though we talked about Benjamin Franklin. Yeah, without, functional electricity, without any telecommunication, You can, of course, use those methods. You don't need to go to church like John Adams or attend the Comédie Française. You're really interested in what I'm saying. That's really cute. You can, of course, just find a play on YouTube, listen to the radio. I've got an app that I really, really like for that, which is Radio Garden. I don't know why the glot will stop here. Anyway, Radio Garden, which I will post, of course, in bio. It's very useful because you can just listen to any radio station from all over the world, and you can have your target language. And I think it's really important to do like John Adams did, which is to focus on the whole prosody and melody of the language, which is something he did at church. He did with lawyers and at the Comédie Française. So you can just listen to something and not necessarily have any idea what's going on, but just listen to the music of the language, which is, again, something he said he wished he had done before. Be exposed to a lot of what we call today comprehensive input. Well, I think they don't necessarily have to be comprehensive. You just need to be exposed to a lot. So now I'm alone for my conclusion, and that's really sad. She's leaving me. Anyway, yes, you can absolutely use all those methods and amplify them by having listen to audiobooks in your target language. And be proud of yourself like Benjamin Franklin was. I think it's a massive ego boost, and it helps tremendously to be proud of what you've achieved. And I'll see you next time, and have a nice language learning journey, and have a happy new year. Bye bye.